Inspiring loyalty. This incredible police dog stays by his fallen officer's side. You won't believe what happens next. Jake Morgan adjusted the collar of his uniform as he stepped into the police cruiser, the weight of the day pressing heavily on his shoulders. Another domestic violence call, a situation that was becoming all too common in Plainfield. It wasn't just a job, it was a calling. He felt the burning need for justice, for protection. As he glanced over at Max, his loyal German shepherd, he found solace in their bond. But the uncertainty gnawed at him. What if today was different? What if he couldn't save them? As they rolled down the familiar streets, tension curled around Jake's gut. Each siren echoed like a ticking clock. Time was running out for someone. He inhaled sharply, fighting the wave of doubt threatening to drown him. "What if I'm not enough, Max?" he muttered under his breath, bracing against the pain of his own fears as the soft panting of his partner filled the space beside him. Deep inside, he questioned whether he could face another night filled with helplessness. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. His mind raced as they neared the scene. Each turn cranked up the anxiety. The conflicting emotions twisted inside him, a mix of determination to do right by that woman and the dread of potential loss. What if this was another call that ended badly? He remembered the whispers of disbelief among the townsfolk, the looks that questioned whether he and the force could truly protect them. Could he really face that now? Jake steeled his mind, focusing on Max. This wasn't just about him. It was about making a difference. His hands gripped the steering wheel tighter, knuckles white from the pressure. The darkness lurking behind the door of the house they approached sent a shiver down his spine. Max sensed it too, his alertness palpable. Action became inevitable, yet uncertainty loomed like a storm cloud, unfurling doubt as they stepped out into the dim light. Exhaling slowly, Jake felt the cold air bite at his nerves. Would it always feel like this? The aroma of fear, regret, and the faintest trace of adrenaline enveloped him. But as they reached the threshold, a whisper of hope flickered within. Would today be the day he'd finally prove everyone wrong? He hesitated for just a moment, heart racing, muscles tense. The door swung open. Time slowed as he fought against the ominous feeling. What happened next was a chaotic convergence of movement and sound, an eruption of force that sent him spiraling into the storm he had feared. As he lunged to protect the victim, pain burst through him. Everything lurched, the sense of duty colliding violently with reality, and in that fleeting moment he reached out, searching for a way back. Max stood unwavering, the scent of sticking sorrow already filling the air around them. Jake could feel the world falling away as darkness enveloped him. What lay ahead? Would loyalty stand alone in the wake of grief and regret? Jake gasped as consciousness flickered back to life, the stark fluorescent lights of the hospital ceiling searing his retinas. Pain radiated through his body like a distant echo of the chaos he momentarily remembered. The muffled din of voices drifted in and out of focus, a backdrop to the throbbing in his head. Where was Max? Panic wrapped around his chest, tightening with every second that passed. "Jake, you're awake!" A nurse rushed to him, her eyes filled with genuine relief. "You've had quite a scare." He struggled to sit up, but a wave of dizziness forced him back down. "Max! Where's Max?" Jake's voice cracked, panic rising. "Your partner is just fine. He's with your sergeant," she assured, placing a gentle hand on his arm. "You took a nasty hit, but you're going to be okay." Her words offered some comfort, yet he couldn't shake the chilling sense of mortality lingering in his mind. Guilt gnawed at him, feeding on the fear that he'd failed not only himself, but those who depended on him. As days passed in the hospital, each fleeting moment made him confront the fragility of strength and courage. He listened to stories of other officers, their own struggles and victories, sharing bonds forged in the fires of adversity. But lurking behind their camaraderie was a darker theme: loss. Friends, partners, lives shattered by the very violence he had sworn to fight. Why do we keep doing this? Jake wondered aloud one day to his brother Mark, who had visited but once a week. Are we really making a difference? Tension knitted Mark's brow as he considered his answer. Because for every person you save, there are countless lives improved. Yes, it can feel hopeless, but the few you help multiply in gratitude. You can't stop fighting just because you fear the outcome. The words resonated through Jake like a subtle awakening. There was a purpose larger than his own doubt. He needed to focus, not just on surviving, but on thriving, for the community, and for Max. When he was finally discharged, he was eager to step back into his boots. He wouldn't be the same after this, not physically, but emotionally. He felt a growing resilience. Each day was an opportunity, not only to serve, but to be a beacon. Returning to duty, the familiar weight of his badge settled against his chest like armor. Yet every call now came with a heightened sense of urgency. The ghosts of yesterday whispered warnings, but he was ready to confront them head-on. With Max at his side, they patrolled the streets, face an unyielding canvas of determination. There was a shift in him. Each interaction with the community brought Jake face to face with his own vulnerability. People expressed their thanks, their fears, and their stories. He began recognizing the shared humanity in every encounter, understanding that it wasn't about simply enforcing the law. It was about creating trust, fostering connection, and being part of their stories. Yet shadows still loomed, often reminding Jake of his own near loss. The once familiar anxiety returned when they received another domestic violence call, echoing the chaos he had narrowly escaped. "We faced it before, Jake," he murmured to Max, a sense of unshakable resolve igniting within. "This time we won't stumble into the storm. We're going to stand in the light." The door opened before him, revealing a scene he couldn't yet comprehend. He had witnessed despair, but this felt different. As dread mixed with determination, Jake took a breath and stepped forward, ready to confront whatever shadows lurked within and around him. But what new revelations awaited him as he entered the room of the unknown? Could he truly face another storm unscathed, or was his journey of self-discovery only beginning? The scene inside the house unfolded like a twisted tapestry of pain and uncertainty. The air was thick with tension, and Jake felt the familiar surge of adrenaline merge with the undercurrents of fear. He scanned the dimly lit room, taking in the frightened faces of children huddled together in the corner, and the woman sitting on the edge of a battered couch, her tear-stained cheeks betraying the gravity of her situation. It wasn't just a call. It was another life caught in the crosshairs of anguish. "Max," Jake whispered, keeping his voice low to avoid startling anyone. The dog shifted beside him, a comforting presence of loyalty. He put a hand on Max's head, seeking solace in that profound connection. "Let's take it slow," he instructed, breathing deeply to quell the rising tide of memories from the hospital. With each step forward, Jake reminded himself that this was not just about enforcing the law. It was about healing, about changing narratives that had been resigned to hopelessness. He approached the woman, whose terrified eyes held a mixture of desperation and defiance. "We're here to help. You don't have to face this alone," he said, his voice steady. When their gazes locked, it was all too easy for him to see fragments of his own struggle reflected back. Despite the confounding chaos, he was determined to ensure she felt his sincerity, to let her know that hope could rise, even in the depths of despair. As they began to communicate, Jake discovered the complexities of her relationship, the unseen threads of manipulation and fear that chained her. He had believed that law enforcement was primarily about power, arresting those who did wrong. Now, he understood it as a delicate balance of empathy and intervention. Each word exchanged carried the potential for salvation, not just for her, but for himself as well. "Why is it so hard to leave?" she asked softly, breaking the silence that had filled the room. Her question struck a chord. Jake had wrestled with the same thoughts. Had he lingered too long in the darkness after the incident? "Sometimes," he began, weighing his words carefully, "the chains we carry are more than just physical. They are emotional and communal. But you have the strength to break them. We can help you." Each word felt like a revelation, not only to her but to him. This was a partnership, a mutual striving for freedom from the scars that marked their lives. Once they formulated a plan, Jake signaled to Max, who instinctively sat on the woman's lap, offering warmth and reassurance. Watching the moment unfold, Jake recognized that this bond was part of his healing too. Max was not merely a tool in uniform, he was a conduit of trust, translating fear into solace. As Jake walked the woman to safety, he felt a shift within himself. The shadows that had hung over him began to dissolve into an empowering determination. He was not just a cog in the machine, but a vital part of a greater purpose. There was power in connection, in fighting for those who felt unseen or unheard. Just as they stepped outside, the weight of the past was rudely interrupted by an aggressive voice from within the house. "You think you can take her?" The threat echoed menacingly through the air, and instinct stirred within Jake. He turned sharply, anxiety weaving through his veins yet filled with an unprecedented resolve. The time had come to confront the specter he had avoided since the incident, the very darkness that had left him breathless. Was he prepared to engage directly with the man who held power over life and death in that room? Solidifying his stance, Jake faced the gate to uncertainty, heart pounding in anticipation. Would he be able to battle the ghosts of his past while becoming the guardian he aspired to be? As uncertainty loomed over him, he leaned into the strength of his purpose and prepared for whatever lay ahead. Jake's grip on the handle of his service weapon tightened as he turned back towards the doorway. He could feel every muscle in his body coiling in readiness, an instinctual response honed over years on the force. The voice, a growl laced with venom, reminded him of the very fears he had spent the last several months trying to overcome. "Get back," he called, his voice steady but low, aimed at both the woman and the children crouched in the shadows. "Stay behind me." He drew in a deep breath, allowing the air to fill his lungs and clear his mind, despite the rapid beating of his heart. It was not just this woman's freedom that hung in the balance. It was also his own future. The murky waters of his past, populated with ghosts of hesitation and doubt, were now inching closer. But this time, he would not shy away. The door creaked ominously as a figure filled the opening, a menacing presence. The man stood large and intimidating, the remnants of a violent past clinging to him like an old coat. Jake recognized him from the records, a predator whose reign over his victims had gone unanswered for too long. "Jake," the man sneered, eyes narrowing, "you think you can save her? She belongs to me." The words flared a viscous anger within Jake, but he channeled it into a careful focus. "This isn't about possession, it's about her life. Your time is over. Let her go." The man laughed, a sound that vibrated with madness. "You don't understand. She's weak. She needs someone to control her." The idea prickled something deep within Jake's psyche. It struck at the very core of his journey toward healing, a dark reminder of the times he had felt powerless, of the anxieties that had plagued him since that day. What if he too was clinging to the belief that he required control? "Strength comes from within," Jake replied, feeling the conviction rise in his chest. "We can break these cycles. You don't own her, and you don't define her. That power ends today." Max shifted beside him, sensing the escalating tension. The dog growled softly, an externate extension of Jake's resolve. "You think that mutt can protect you?" The man snarled, stepping forward. With a quick glance, Jake noted the shifting weight of the man's stance, the twitch of his fingers. Communication, both verbal and physical. This was all part of the game. The stakes had moved beyond mere freedom. It was a direct confrontation between his willingness to change and the adversary who thrived on despair. "You're wrong," Jake said, raising his voice. "I have the power of connection, of compassion. You might think you can break her, but we're coming for you. It's time for a reckoning." The threat reverberated off the walls as the man's laughter subsided, replaced by a simmering rage framed by disbelief. "Tough talk won't save you, officer. You've always been a coward hiding behind a badge." A part of Jake's mind recognized the baiting tone. This was the moment, to draw out the man's true nature. The one truth echoed in his thoughts. Weakness did not stem from vulnerability but from fear. No longer would he let fear dictate his path. Pushing through the invisible barrier of uncertainty, Jake stepped forward, ready to protect this woman who dared to hope for a different life. His heart pounded loudly, but for the first time it was driven by conviction, no longer the echoes of a haunted past. As the confrontation tightened around him, he wondered how far he would go to protect this embodiment of resilience. If he had to confront this very embodiment of his fears, so be it. This was not just a battle for her life. It was a critical step on his road to redemption. What's it going to be, Jake? The man's challenge hung in the air, an invitation to engage in a fight that could determine the trajectory of his journey. Jake steadied himself, ready to wage this internal battle head-on. The duel was not just against a man, but against the very fears that had held him captive for too long. Would he seize this chance to forge the guardian within, or would the shadows pull him back once more? The answer would define not just their fates, but his own. As he locked eyes with the antagonist, Jake braced for the confrontation he had spent so long avoiding, every fiber of his being roaring for resolution. Jake's heartbeat thundered in his ears, drowning out the tension that hung in the air. He held the man's gaze, that fierce glint threatening to pull him back into a chasm of doubt. It would be so easy to slip into the old patterns of fear, to hesitate and question his worth. Yet now was not the time. His role mattered, and within that role he had something profound to prove, not just to the woman behind him, but to himself. Each breath steadied him, helping to harness the adrenaline coursing through his veins. He thought of his training, the lessons etched into his mind through countless confrontations. This was more than just a tactical standoff. It was an emotional war. The man in front of him wasn't just an aggressor. He was a living representation of everything Jake had long feared. The very capacity for cruelty and manipulation lay bare. "Get her out of here, now!" he commanded, directing his voice towards the woman and her children. His eyes didn't waver from the man's as he took a step forward, instinctively putting himself in harm's way for these innocent lives. It was a decision fueled by resilience, an active choice to face down what once had terrified him. The predator snarled, anger radiating from him like heat from a fire. But Jake could see the cracks forming beneath the man's bravado. Rage masked fear. It told Jake that this man thrived on intimidation, and Jake would not be intimidated. In that pivotal moment, clarity surged through Jake's mind. He recalled the sessions he had undertaken with his therapist, confronting the shadows of self-doubt and the memories of past failures. With each revelation, he'd come to understand that growth was not just about overcoming obstacles, but about learning to see one's own value. He was not the coward the man claimed him to be. He was the protector, the guardian, the one willing to change the course of history for another. "Do you think this fear of yours will hold me back?" Jake's voice cut through the tension, deep and unwavering. "No. I've shed that weight. I am not a victim of your choices or your cruelty." Jake stepped even closer, heart thrumming with conviction. He reached for his service weapon, not out of fear, but as a symbol of his commitment. It signified clarity, not just of purpose but of identity. This was about creating safety for the woman and her children, but it was also about reclaiming his narrative against the looming specter of control. "Your power over her ends here. You underestimate her strength, because it's the strength I'm willing to fight for." The man visibly bristled, the illusion of control slipping as he registered Jake's unwavering stance. There was a realization dawning on him. This officer, so fortified by determination, could not be easily demonized or bullied. Every ounce of Jake's essence screamed for assertion and resilience. The darkness that once overshadowed his life was being challenged by light, his light. Then, in an unexpected flash, Jake felt the ground just beneath him shift, an earthquake of sorts triggered by his willpower. This new certainty reshaped everything around him. He could hear the quiet determination building within the woman and her children, spurring them to take action as they began to move away, their whispered moments of courage now visible in the dim light. "Turn back," the man growled, his voice laced with desperation as he tried to regain control. But it was too late. The wall Jake had built against vulnerability transformed into an unwavering shield against the darkness. With his focus sharpened, Jake braced himself. The confrontation loomed larger than before. He realized that it wasn't just a battle for survival, it was an awakening. Every step forward marked a reclamation of dignity, not just for the woman he was protecting, but for himself as well. As the two men prepared to collide, Jake wondered if this defeat could finally sever the chains binding his spirit to the fears of his past. The air hung heavy with the promise of conflict, and Jake felt his resolve ignite further, preparing to ignite a showdown that would define his very essence. Would he truly emerge as the man he aspired to be? Or was there another destiny waiting around the corner? Jake's mind sharpened like a blade, honing in on the imminent clash with the man before him. The surroundings, once a mere backdrop, transformed into a canvas that reflected his inner turmoil. The broken glass underfoot captured the flickering light, shards glimmering with the shards of his own fractured past. It was as if the world conspired to mirror his struggle, each fragment unwilling to let him forget the battles he had fought, both within and without. The moment they squared off, Jake sensed a shift, not just in the other man's body language but within himself. It was a dance of power, where every twitch and glare carried weight. Uncertainty hung in the air, but it no longer clung to Jake. Instead, he embraced it, stepping forward deliberately as though carving a path through the fog of fear that had once clouded his vision. "You think your anger feeds you?" Jake replied, letting his voice slice through the tension like a knife. "It only feeds your weakness. You don't scare me anymore." Those words resonated within him, echoing louder than the adrenaline-fueled percussion of his heart, a declaration that marked a turning point in how he viewed not only this moment, but everything that had led him here. With a calculated but assured grip, he raised his service weapon, steadying it against the turmoil brewing inside. It was a reminder of why he wore the badge, not merely to enforce law, but to infuse justice and protect the voiceless. As he confronted the manifestation of his fear, Jake tapped into something profoundly primal, a sense of purpose that surged through his veins, igniting a fire previously dimmed. The man snarled, his aggression amplifying in the face of Jake's unyielding stance. But Jake observed the flickering in the man's eyes, the uncertainty beneath layers of bravado. In that moment of revelation, an unsettling thought crossed Jake's mind. Were they really so different? Both men hungered for control, yet Jake chose responsibility over brute force. This fight wasn't merely over physical dominance, it was about reclaiming moral ground. "Every cruel comment you've ever made, every action meant to intimidate only reflects your weakness," Jake declared, his voice now bolstered by an invigorating conviction. It was an affirmation that transcended the immediate confrontation. The man's reaction, a mix of surprise and fury, only served to fortify Jake's resolve. As the lines blurred between law enforcement and emotional confrontation, Jake understood he wasn't just standing up for the woman and her children. He was redefining his very essence. The vulnerability he had once feared transformed into a source of strength. He drew from every painful memory, channeling them into a posture of defiance and compassion. The tension escalated, building with each heartbeat. But Jake realized that strategy mattered more than the physical confrontation. He devised a plan in those fleeting moments, gauging the man's posture and anticipating movement. Every breath counted. Each second was a pivot point. With careful precision, he shouted, "We can end this without violence." His tone dropped an octave, evidencing the seriousness that underpinned his words. The invitation loomed large, a stark contrast to the chaos surrounding them. It was as if Jake were extending an olive branch, shifting the battlefield from one of brute strength to emotional reckoning. In the stillness that followed, the man hesitated, and with it came the stirring sound of resilience beneath the surface. Hope. Jake could sense the palpable fear weaving through the man's fury, a vulnerability nestled in his heart like a tightly held secret. Jake took another calculated step closer, unwilling to cower but ready to navigate the depths. "You can choose differently. You can be more than this cycle of anger." The words hung in the air, forming a bridge towards resolution. Would this confrontation yield a new beginning, or would it spiral into violence? As uncertainty gripped him, Jake braced for the next move, his own, and that of the man confronting him. Would he ever break free of the man's shadow, or would past fears once again intersect with this defining moment? The tension stretched thin, ready to snap, Jake's focus narrowed, the seconds stretching into what felt like an eternity. The street corner loomed around him, a crucible for conflict, yet it pulsed with a raw energy that ignited a dormant part of him. This was more than a standoff. It was an opportunity for transformation. The air vibrated with anticipation as the other man's internal struggle played out in real time. The shift in his posture, a slight retreat of the shoulders, did not go unnoticed by Jake. Was it acceptance? Or was it the instinctual drive to protect himself? Jake felt his own heartbeat steadying his resolve with each pulse. He was no longer just an officer confronting chaos. He was a man choosing purpose over fear. "Let's put an end to this cycle," Jake continued, keeping his voice calm and steady. He leaned into the moment, drawing from the well of experience that shaped him both personally and professionally. The half-formed memories of his father's harsh words, the vulnerability of his own childhood, and the faces of those he'd failed to protect merged into clarity. The anger that had once fueled him shifted to a controlled power that was now an ally. With each word exchanged, Jake unraveled the layers of what it meant to engage with someone caught in a tempest of rage. Take a step back and breathe. You felt it, the anger, the pain. But that's not the answer. This confrontation could go another way, and it begins with you. The man flinched, disbelief clouding his features as he processed Jake's unexpected approach. For so long, he had wielded his pain as a weapon, and now, confronted with an alternative, vulnerability softened into introspection. Jake could see it slipping through the cracks of bravado. Harnessing this moment, Jake shifted his strategy from combat to connection. Across the chasm that divided them, he reached out not with his hands but with words. "You think being strong means aggression, but true strength lies in understanding, in choosing to rise above." His voice resonated with a sincerity that was unmistakable. A flicker of something deeper crossed the man's expression. Was it shame? Fear? It was impossible to tell in the dim light, but the weight of uncertainty shifted as more than just physical power exchanged hands. This was a dance of souls, a convergence of past and future, a reckoning not defined by the nature of their encounter but by its potential outcome. Jake stepped closer, heart racing with the pounding of his newfound hope. "Together, we can break this cycle," he offered, gesturing to the quiet darkness swirling around them. "Let's change the conversation. Choose a different path." The stillness deepened, holding both men in a suspended animation of possibility. The chance was there, palpable like the night air, tinged with the electric scent of change. As Jake's gaze locked onto the hesitation forming in his opponent's eyes, he simultaneously grappled with his own fears, the dread of failure, of falling short again. Would the man accept this offer? Or would Jake's courage have been for naught? The magnitude of that question loomed large as his breath caught in his throat uncertainly. He had faced numerous adversities on the job, but confronting the ghost of his own inadequacy stood as the ultimate test. And then, as the man's gaze faltered, a momentary flicker of clarity broke through. Jake held his breath, waiting for the spark that would either ignite a new beginning or plunge them back into darkness. What lay on the edge of that decision? Would Jake's attempt to forge a new reality pay off, or would it spiral beyond his control into chaos once more? A choice hung in the balance, and in the stillness of the night, the moment of truth loomed uncomfortably close. Jake's heart raced, the stillness vibrating with the weight of unspoken decisions. The man's brow furrowed, each fleeting expression a silent struggle. Seconds felt like hours as Jake analyzed and recalibrated his approach. He recognized this was not merely a dialogue. It was a pivotal intersection of their lives, a moment where vulnerability could redefine stark realities. With that awareness came a wave of responsibility. Beyond the badge and duty, Jake felt the tangible essence of empathy wash over him. It had taken years to hone this understanding, yet here, in a shadowy corner of a fraught reality, he was living it. His own fear hovered at the edges, a whisper that urged him to retreat, to guard himself against potential failure. But Jake had come too far to turn back now. He silently vowed to confront his doubts head-on, even if that meant facing the unyielding specter of failure again. Trust is not given, it's earned. And right now, we're at the precipice of that chance, he said, lowering himself a bit, matching the other man's vulnerable stance. The raw sincerity in his voice echoed around them, an invitation masked as a challenge. "I'm here, and I'm asking you to let me help." The man's defiance wavered. From enraged reactions to hesitant shifts, his internal conflict was a mirror of Jake's own. Would fear prevail, or could they both rise above their pasts? Jake's mind flickered to the police academy, where mentors had taught him about de-escalation. Those lessons now felt miles away, yet resonated within him like an anthem of purpose. As Jake stood firm, a familiar voice inside him whispered reminders of his path. "You can guide, or you can fight," it urged, battling against the rush of adrenaline fueling his instincts to take control through force. Once again, he chose the harder road, compassion. He remembered the countless times he had rushed into chaos, relying on brute strength rather than compassion. Now, an unexpected momentum surged through him, one that revealed a deeper truth. True courage lay in building bridges over barriers. The man, still seething, shifted uneasily. The armor of defiance was beginning to crack, exposing strands of vulnerability. Jake pressed forward. "Let's talk, man-to-man. What brought you here?" The question hung in the air, heavy with potential. A change in energy coursed between them, a communion of souls grappling with their shared humanity. Jake's voice took on a gentler note, shedding the authoritative tone born of duty, and instead embodying understanding, a raw, unfiltered compassion. The man's shoulders dipped slightly as if the sheer weight of expectation had begun to dissipate. Jake's heart raced again. Was this an invitation to the deeper conversation they both desperately needed? Clarity emerged in the man's eyes, flashes of memories that mirrored Jake's own. A childhood marred by conflict, decisions made in pain, and the agony of feeling misunderstood. Jake seized the moment, going deeper. The anger can eat you alive, or you can transform it into something powerful. You have a choice, just like I do. Right here and right now. He let his words linger in the air, offering the rawness of vulnerability as both a weapon and a shield. Jake could feel time tightening around them like a noose, yet he pressed on, tethered to a profound yearning for genuine connection. Would this acknowledgement pave their way forward, or would it heighten the stakes, an invitation to danger hidden beneath a passion for transformation? Suddenly the man's eyes darted away, clouds of doubt shading his expression once more. The stillness surged and dragged under the weight of hesitant dreams, and Jake sensed the overwhelming silence signaling a choice about to unfold. Where would this conversation lead? Would they shape their destinies together, or would personal demons reassert themselves and plunge them both back into despair? The specter of uncertainty hung heavy in the air, and Jake prepared himself once more, ready for whatever might come next. The moment stretched, a delicate balance teetering on the edge of hope and despair. Jake watched the man as his eyes darted back and forth, visibly battling with the weight of his own past. Every muscle in Jake's body coiled with anticipation as he waited for the floodgates to crack open, eager to offer a lifeline, yet terrified of the turbulence that might follow. "Listen," Jake continued, his voice steady but low. "I know what it feels like to carry anger around, to feel like every decision is a fight against the world. But you don't have to do it alone. I'm here. Let's figure this out together." The man's face shifted, anger giving way to confusion, then a flicker of understanding. Jake could see it unfolding, a gradual dismantling of facades. He remembered his own moments of vulnerability, the early days at the precinct, when uncertainty had gnawed at his confidence, begging him to question if he was cut out for the work. In that space, Jake faced an inner conflict of his own, the temptation to break the tension with impatience, to push harder. But he resisted. This man was not a suspect. He was a human swallowed by circumstances he couldn't control. Jake was learning, in real time, how to embrace difficult conversations, how to transform raw moments into opportunities for growth. "Tell me about your anger," Jake prompted, lowering his voice further as he stepped closer. The proximity bore a weight of sincerity. "What are you really feeling?" The question struck like a match in a dark room. The man inhaled deeply, as if the air bore the weight of centuries of pent-up frustrations. The shift was palpable. He was no longer fighting against Jake, but wrestling with his own demons. I was never good enough, he exhaled, his voice cracking. Nobody cared. I had to fend for myself from a young age. Trust? It's a joke. It always leads to pain. Jake felt his own heartache. Who hadn't been there? The fear of inadequacy was a universal bond. You're not alone in that, Jake replied, his eyes reflecting the truth of the moment. I felt that too, and hell, I still do sometimes. But trust can be rebuilt. It starts with vulnerability. The man's shoulders slumped as he absorbed the weight of Jake's admission. This was the crux of their connection. Solidarity in struggle, shared burdens, and the possibility of support. A step toward healing that held the potential to reshape who they were meant to become. Just then, a flash of anger overcame the man again, his fists clenching tightly as if preparing to strike. Jake braced himself, internally cataloging the tools he might need, not for combat, but for connection. I don't know if I can let anyone in again, he erupted, intensity crystallizing in his voice. Then don't, Jake interrupted, steadier than he felt. Not yet, but consider it. What would it take for you to breathe without that weight? To reclaim trust? It's more than just a word. It's a lifeline. There it was. An opportunity to transcend their histories, a chance for Jake to wield the power of understanding. The moment fell silent, charged with unexplainable potential. The man's frustrated glare softened as he pondered the question, a battle now brewing between dormant hopes and the stubbornness of his past. Jake understood this hesitancy. It was the same impulse that had stalled him many times along his career, the fear shackled to shame. Just think about it. Trust requires courage. It doesn't mean fully letting go. It means taking one small step forward, Jake implored. As his words settled, Jake caught sight of something shifting behind those previously hardened eyes. A glint of renewed determination began to surface. Whether it was the first echo of change flickering to life, or a momentary lapse, Jake couldn't tell. But for Jake, this was more than an attempt to help someone else. It was a reflection of his own journey, an affirmation of growth and vulnerability. Jake took a breath, feeling a shift within himself. The realization that healing was a two-way street, a threshold he was just beginning to cross. Would this moment ignite a transformation? The impending silence whispered possibilities, inviting them down an unknown pathway of connection, fraught with its complexities, yet ripe with promise. As Jake looked into the man's eyes, he felt the tension rise again, heavy with unresolved pain. What if this moment held the key to a deeper understanding, a push toward not just healing, but an entire reinvention of their lives? Jake braced himself, knowing that the next turn in this journey could redefine them both entirely. But what awaited them on that path remained a shrouded uncertainty. The tension in the air gave way to a trembling pause, where the weight of unspoken histories coiled tight around them. Jake studied the man before him, noticing the flickers of a tumultuous internal battle raging beneath the surface. It was as though time stood still, inviting both of them to confront their realities head-on. Now's the time to decide who you want to be, Jake pressed, his voice a steady anchor amidst the tempest. You've carried this pain for so long, but it doesn't have to dictate your future. Jake reflected on his own journey, the days of second-guessing his choices, the nights spent haunted by the burden of guilt and self-doubt. He remembered the raw moments spent on the hospital bed, when he learned that true compassion meant leaning into the discomfort for the sake of transformation. Each personal resolution carved a new path, and in this moment, he wondered if they could carve a path together. For a moment, the man looked vulnerable, stripped of the armor he so aggressively wore. "What if I don't know how?" he finally uttered, words heavy with uncertainty. Jake felt a surge of compassion. "Then let's figure it out. Together. None of us have all the answers, but every choice we make gives us a chance for a fresh start." There was a flicker of hope, and Jake felt it shift in the air, a heartbeat of connection. This was not merely about saving the woman or confronting the man. It was about redefining what it meant to heal from within. As Jake recalled the countless hours spent in discussion with colleagues about the true power of community, he realized that this moment was a microcosm of that very principle. Healing began with honest dialogue, with vulnerability as the bridge. The man inhaled deeply, a crack forming in the facade of anger. "I don't want to be this way anymore," he confessed, bitterness softening into surrender, paving the way for a more honest exchange. "No one is born wanting to hurt others," Jake answered, feeling an innate urge to bring forth the humanity in the man. "You've had your reasons. Let's uncover those. Let's find the path forward." It was a truth echoed through generations, a collective history marked by choices influenced by pain and fear. As Jake looked steadfastly in the man's eyes, he envisioned the possibility of breaking the cycle, not just for themselves, but for those who had long suffered as well. Encouraged by the shift in energy, Jake stepped even closer, closing the distance that once felt insurmountable. "This doesn't have to be a fight. It can be an unveiling. Trust takes time, but it begins with a single step into the light." As his words hung in the air, Jake noticed something shift within the man. A spark of resilience unfurling like a reluctant bud, eager to bloom. It reminded him of the journey he had faced after his own near-fatal encounter. He had emerged bruised yet profoundly changed, able to rediscover purpose, to recognize the strength lying dormant beneath his fears. "Can you take that step?" Jake implored, a blend of challenge and encouragement woven into his tone. "Can you give yourself a chance to rise?" For the first time, the man didn't respond with aggression. Instead, he appeared lost in thought, wrestling with the prospect of change, fear clashing with hope. "That woman inside deserves so much better than what you've shown her," Jake continued, pouring every ounce of sincerity into his voice. "But I know it's hard to see that when you're shackled by your own pain. Let's break those chains, together." The door to resolution trembled at the edges. Jake's heart swelled with determination, a silent prayer that the man might align with the truth that lay just beyond their confrontation. He recognized they were standing on the precipice of something far greater than the struggle for power. This was a moment steeped in the potential for redemption. I want to," the man finally whispered, his voice laden with vulnerability. "But what if I fail?" Jake turned this doubt into an avenue for discussion. "Failure is not the end. It's a step in learning. It's feeling the fear, but taking that leap anyway. It takes courage to rise against the currents of our past. It demands honesty." Jake felt the energy shift, an unspoken pact forming between them, threaded with possibility. He met the man's gaze with unyielding integrity, a new determination igniting. "Let's confront this together. There's strength in acknowledging our weaknesses. Let's channel that strength into something impactful." In that moment, the atmosphere blossomed with light, a fragile yet persistent flame against a backdrop of darkness. As the man began to nod slowly, Jake felt the weight of his own burdens lift. The journey toward healing was far from over, but they had taken the first step together. He wasn't just an officer. He was a catalyst for change, one who could brave the storm alongside those who had lost their way. Everything they had gone through, the pain, the struggle, the darkness, was coming together, merging into a storyline of hope, resilience, and redemption. Jake found solace in this newfound partnership, a bond leading not only to healing but to blossoming courage. And as they stood in unity, Jake's resolve crystallized. The path ahead would be challenging, but together, they would forge new beginnings. This was it, the moment where Jake realized he could face the storms of life head-on, transforming battles into bridges of connection. There would be more calls, more challenges ahead, but he knew now that with his heart wide open and Max by his side, they could protect and empower those in need, while simultaneously reclaiming their own narratives. They had embraced the calling of their purpose, and for that, he felt a profound sense of fulfillment. In that what seemed to be a fractured world, Jake understood he had harnessed his greatest strength, the ability to connect and empathize deeply, overcoming fears, and allowing healing to thrive, one soul at a time. As he walked away from the intersection of conflict and towards the hope radiating behind him, he felt an overwhelming sense of clarity and purpose solidify in his chest. This was how change began, and this was just the beginning. The end of one chapter marked the start of another, the legacy of resilience unfolding both within and around him. The voices of doubt faded against the din of his own inner strength, and Jake Morgan knew he had truly conquered his greatest adversary, the hesitancy that once defined him. He straightened his shoulders, knowing he was now walking a path where service and understanding would always reign supreme. The road would be long, but clarity settled in. In that luminous moment, he achieved what had once felt unattainable. He had proven himself capable of change, not just in the lives he touched, but also in his own. Jake had reached a stage of solid confidence and recognized competence, establishing the unwavering position he needed to thrive in the life he chose. Jake turned, glancing back at the man, and gave a short nod of acknowledgement, a silent affirmation of their shared journey into the sunlight that would follow. Sometimes even the fiercest battles could bloom into the most radiant resolutions, transcending fear and creating a legacy of restoration. Remember that feeling, because right now, it's not just about the individual victory. It's about demonstrating what can happen when we confront darkness with light and forge an unbreakable bond of trust. You need to subscribe now to witness more incredible transformations that inspire courage. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and keep these stories alive. Comment below with your reactions and theories about this journey. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to hear this powerful conclusion.